At a young age, when you're at university, one of the things that you have as your advantage is time.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for joining me today on the Go with Manav. For those that do not know me, I'm your host, Manav Hartono. Chris, could you please tell us a bit more about yourself?
Hi, Manav, and thank you for inviting me to today's show. I'm very honored to be invited by a university alum. My background is I'm from the UK. I was born and raised in England. My parents are from Hong Kong originally, and I grew up, in my formative years and in the early part of my career in the UK as well. I went to the University of Exeter to study a law degree. And following that, I gained a training contract with a national law firm called Irwin Mitchell. Qualified there for a couple of years before moving on to a couple of more firms. And in between, I had a stint as sort of an in-house general counsel slash in-house counsel slash operations person with a startup business in e-commerce at the time. And then following that, I then, after about 10 years in the law, in total, I then moved over to Hong Kong in 2010 to launch my own business in legal recruiting. The company is called Star Anise Legal, which still runs today. And since then, we've also branched out into a couple of side businesses. One is in training and coaching called Star Anise Leadership and Training, or SALT as an acronym, and also an interim resource and flexible solutions business called YUZU, ALSP. And the ALSP stands for Alternative Legal Services Provider.
Very exciting stuff, Chris, and I'm looking forward to diving deeper into learning more about your career journey as we go on this podcast. Now, first, I want to touch upon what was it like being born and raised in the UK?
It's an odd question because I've never, I don't think I've been asked that question before. It's, I guess, anyone born in any environment, it's just natural to them because they don't know anything different. But as you grow older, yes, you do notice the differences. The UK is quite a melting pot when it comes to diversity, even back in those days as well. That's one of the things I really appreciate the older I get. Yeah, that I've been exposed to different cultures and people from different backgrounds, and coming to Hong Kong as well. It's very different. Obviously it's predominantly Chinese, but then you also have a lot of people from the international community, and arguably it's even more diverse because of the professional services industry which attracts so many people from different parts of the world. Within even my own social network, I've got friends from South America, from all over Europe, all over Asia and the mainland China. My upbringing has also helped me to be able to go with the flow, and, get along with people from all different nationalities, whilst working here in Hong Kong. I grew up as a 1980s kid, and it's not as ethnically diverse then as it is now if you go to the major cities. And so despite there being a fairly good mix, if you're outside of those communities, then you start to see a little bit more discrimination and racism in everyday life. In a way, it's fortunately for me, I was able to avoid a lot of incidences, which you may see in the news, but at the same time, you're aware of what's going on around you. So it's built up a certain level of resilience and determination to get through, and that's really been the building blocks of my life so far.
Yeah, I think one thing I truly appreciate from living in the UK is definitely how diverse it is. I didn't expect that as well. And the culture shock I had as well from moving to Hong Kong and the UK. I felt like our roles reversed, where I was born and raised in Hong Kong, then moved to the UK. So I definitely felt that as well. I didn't realize I was surrounded by so many melting pots as well in the UK, which was really nice. And yeah, still enjoy it and see it around me as I'm still living there today. So moving on to the next question is, when did your interest in law begin?
Mine's just a really random story, or a very sort of bizarre story. I think I was at the age of 12 when I experienced my house being burgled, and I was the first person to walk into the house and realize that our house had been ransacked. I just felt an overwhelming rush of anger and disappointment that somebody had invaded our privacy. And then at that point, I just said, right, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to work for the prosecution, and I'm going to find all of these criminals and send them away into jail and make sure that they never appear, or at least they get rehabilitated. From then on, I was determined at least to study a degree in law. And so my A levels, the subjects that I was studying in, were geared towards that. So my A level topics included government and politics and history, world affairs. That was 20th century world affairs and geography. I deliberately picked those topics because I thought they would be good in terms of both critical thinking and providing a good foundation for a law degree, and those were at the time what was perceived as being quite good topics to study to then go on to studying a degree in law, as opposed to, taking an A level in business studies or general studies and sciences. I didn't think at the time it was that relevant. Now, I think nowadays it might be more acceptable to have more diverse topics, when it comes to your IB or your A levels. And, I think
Yeah.
universities should be more accepting of that, to take on a broader spread of students with different interests.
That was a very interesting story. I mean, it's so interesting how a personal experience like that can really influence what you wanted to do, and you continue to stay driven and committed to pursue that goal, which is what allowed you to then pursue
Mm,
that degree in university and then impact the rest of your career. So I wouldn't have known that when I met you, the fact that that was the reason that inspired you. I mean, similarly with me, for example, what interested me to pursue psychology at university originally was I was watching a crime documentary and I thought to myself, why do people kill each other? I mean, it was a bit similar, but I wanted to understand
mm.
the behavioral aspect about that. Yeah,
Related to that, actually, you've just sort of reminded me as well. As I was growing up, even before the age of 12, I used to love watching cop shows. And so, back in the 80s, there was Cagney and Lacey and Chips, the California Highway Patrol, these guys on these big motorbikes chasing after criminals. And so I guess maybe that sort of was probably the precursor to what the incident that then happened when I was 12. So it's funny how life works and how things really work out in a way. Everyone has their own individual story, and that's great.
indeed. You don't know what can happen in the power of the media and our wider influences for sure.
Mm.
Now, moving on to the next question is what made you decide to pursue your undergraduate degree at the University of Exeter? Did you visit Exeter beforehand? And why did this university stand out? And tying into the next question is what made you want to become the president or the chair of the Alumni Association in Hong Kong?
Just briefly touching on your second question, I never envisaged that I would be holding that position of the chair of the Hong Kong chapter of the Exeter University Alumni. But going to your first question, why Exeter? Things haven't really changed these days as well. You do a lot of research into universities. Firstly, which is a good university? Secondly, which is a good university for the topic that you wish to study? Thirdly, I guess in consideration for that is, in relation to the top universities for that degree, is that a marketable university for the profession that you want to eventually go into? Now, if you don't have any particular requirements or desire to go into any particular industry or profession, then maybe I guess the second or third considerations don't come into it. So it's more about the university. But there were quite a few other considerations. I've always believed that university would be, sort of the coming of age. Would be the first time that I would be living out on my own, living an independent life. And one of the things that really stuck to me was one of my A level teachers said that education is very important, but you've always got to have a balance in your life. It's not continual studying. You need to have something that balances that out. For example, socializing with your friends, playing sports, or some activity which helps you relax. And that really stuck to me when I was choosing universities as well, because I wanted to have a place where there would be a campus, and you could, enjoy life on campus, but there would also be an active student union, and you would have a good balance between studying at a good prestigious university, and they also have facilities, for example, sports facilities and bars and other venues that would enable you to grow as well and to meet new
Yeah.
people. I felt that Exeter, on paper at least, ticked all of those requirements. And looking at the photos in their glossy brochure, I thought, wow, this looks really stunning. I'd love to be studying in a place like this. If anything, it felt almost American, like an American
Mm.
university campus. And that was a sort of lifestyle I aspired to at the time. I actually drove down there for an open day event, as well as a couple of other universities, just to see what it would be like, what the campus looked like, and I was just blown over when I went to see the campus at the time, and just saw how lush and green the whole campus was, and the buildings were very nice, and the facilities looked great. So I thought, well, yeah, this is the place for me.
Yeah, I think one thing I also visited Exeter before I decided that I wanted to go there. And one thing for sure is firstly, I didn't realize there were that many hills. When
Yeah.
I was there in person compared to online, I thought, oh, it was so lush, it was so pretty, the nature, the green, the scenery there, it was all incredible. But that was something I had to, I guess, I mean, I loved my time there as well, but that was something I had to, I guess, commit. I was like, oh God, I have to walk up all of these hills, go to my lectures, but
Well,
it's all right, it
exactly. I
was
mean,
worth
I
it.
had that same feeling as well. When your first impression is great, but then once you're there and you're having to climb up the that hill, I lived on the other side of the campus in a hall called Yard, and
Yeah.
having to climb up there and also climb up the other way towards the Amory building, where the law faculty was housed at the time, and it's one one of those. Things that you get accustomed to, but you breathe a huge sigh of relief at the end of the year when you'll be living in a house on the other side, and you don't have to climb those hills after that first year. So when you said that you went to visit, do you mean that you were living in Hong Kong and you actually flew over to the UK to visit the campus?
Yeah, so I visited a couple of other universities as well. I thought it was important. This was after completing my GCSE. So I went to see Warwick, I saw UCL, I saw Exeter.
Right.
Exeter stood out to me. And we actually drove to Exeter, which ended up being the furthest. Yeah, and when we got there, I was just blown away by the countryside. I love nature. So I wanted a campus university as well. So the fact that it had that nature and then the campus feel and the student community, I just thought this was the place. And the course I was doing was psychology, so it's still a very prestigious degree to do at
Yeah.
Exeter and very popular amongst peers and leads to fantastic employability options. So I thought I made the right choice and I'm so glad I went to Exeter. Yeah, had the best time ever.
Good.
So yeah, that leads to my second question then is because your student experience at Exeter was so impactful and you're still giving back to the community by being a part of the alumni association. So how do you feel to be part of the role as the president or chair?
Certainly. I mean, it's a great honor to be invited to become the chair of the Hong Kong chapter of the alumni here. Just cards on the table. I wasn't initially involved in any alumni activities for the best half of my career. Coming out of university and then going into work life, and basically until I got to Hong Kong, the most I had with in connections with the university was really just a newsletter that was posted through my door once a year.
Yeah,
And it was only when I came to Hong Kong, probably about a year into living in Hong Kong, I connected with somebody either within Hong Kong, or somebody had reached out to me from the university saying, we actually have an active alumni in Hong Kong, and would you like to participate? And so I went to one of the events. Then, I got to meet the people there and got to meet a couple of committee members. Then one of them invited me to one of the committee meetings, and they just said, "Look, would you like to sit in and observe the discussions that we have?" From there, it just sort of snowballed, really. I just continued attending the events, and eventually, after a couple of years, they actually invited me to become a member of the committee. So I took part in the activities there and helping with the organization. and reaching out to alumni. There were a couple of chairs who were sitting in that role before me, and one by one they actually left Hong Kong. At that point, I was building very good relationships with the international office of the university, and that particular department is the one that's in charge of overseas alumni, and they just invited me to become the chair, and so I thought, well, why not? It's a great honor and privilege to do so. So I've been in this role for a good 6-7 years now, and I think the bulk of that period has been during the COVID years. So unfortunately, over that period, we didn't have as many events as we would like. So we were trying to find a few more creative ways to keep in touch with alumni through the newsletters and through webinars, sort of similar to a podcast like this. We had employability events, and where we invited senior figures in the professional community, and also during one of the webinars, we invited the Exeter Careers Advisory Service to come along and give us a talk, a panel discussion with graduate recruitment managers, one from a law firm and one from a multinational company, to give their views of how it differs and what sort of tips they could offer to students when they're embarking on their first steps of going out for a graduate job.
Wow, that all sounds so amazing, and I'm so glad to hear that you still have that relationship and you're still working with them today and giving back to the community and as an alumni. Now, moving on to the next question. So, you graduated from Exeter and you worked in a couple of corporate jobs in the UK before moving to Hong Kong. So, how's it like working in law jobs in the UK? And when it came to deciding that you wanted to eventually start your own business, why did you choose to move to Hong Kong to pursue entrepreneurship?
My career is basically split into two halves so far. The first half was really building my career as a lawyer, as a corporate M&A lawyer. So a lot of the work I was doing was buying and selling businesses, divestitures, joint ventures, such like, and advising on commercial agreements as well from time to time. It's something that I really enjoyed, and it was something that I really wanted to do even at university. So I had an inkling in my first year at university that I really was interested in corporate law, and I studied that as one of my electives, or rather company law. I really enjoyed that particular module. And I thought, well, this is really interesting about how companies operate and how it's almost like the life cycle of a human being. You've got the equivalent of the birth of a company, and then its maturity over the years, and it goes through a cycle. And some are continuing into old age, but some die off. You can almost marry one company with another, through a merger, or it can have quite a large family, with a group of companies. Really met my expectations was that my my vision of what it would be like as a corporate lawyer, it didn't disappoint when it actually came into realization. So I guess maybe I visualized that even at university, that I really wanted to be a corporate lawyer. And so the way that I worked and what I did was actually really geared towards that. And one of the hurdles that you have to overcome, not only in terms of getting your first job as a trainee lawyer, being on the first rung of the ladder, but also once you've qualified, getting into the department that you really want to specialize in. I was very fortunate that I was able to do that. And that helped me continue and further my career as a corporate lawyer.
So my next question is, why did you decide then to move to Hong Kong to pursue your entrepreneurship ventures?
Really, the trigger for that event was really the global financial crash in 2008. During those times, I mean, for viewers there who remember that time, a lot of the big companies started to fold, business and the economy started to tank around the world. Fortunately for me, and I was still very busy throughout 2008 and for half of 2009. But then in the summer of 2009, I actually started to see that the deals that I was working on started to fade away. And I was then started to think, well, what's going to happen as a corporate lawyer. My profession and industry is wholly dependent on deal work, acquisitions, banking and finance deals, and joint ventures and the like. For me, my concern was that it wasn't just the UK that was affected, but the whole of Europe, the rest of the world. I started to think about it quite philosophically. Was thinking that, I've had, a very my good fill of being a corporate lawyer. And at that point, I was thinking I can continue becoming continue as a corporate lawyer through to the rest of my career. My official title was legal director, but I was effectively one step away from partnership at the firm. I just felt that, I could continue until I'm a partner and all the way through to retirement. But at the same time, I had an early experience working in a startup business for about a year, and I was able to get back into the law. So I just felt that the economy is really crap at the moment. There's no way that, certainly over the next year or so, that things will start to bounce back. Even if I took a year out, for example, I don't think there'll be any loss to my career. I can just jump straight back in if I wanted to. So I had that sort of in mind that I've got that sort of flexible approach. And so I was thinking, well, looking back, where have I experienced or seen economies bounce back? And the one area that I saw was Asia, and particularly Hong Kong. And in the past, Hong Kong has experienced a lot of setbacks, but they seem to bounce back so quickly, like within 6 months or 12 months. And
Yeah.
that would be the case in my lifetime, certainly, for the Asian financial crisis in 97, 98. And then there was also the dot-com bubble bursting in 2000 globally, and then also SARS in 2003. So those are three major events that happened and directly impacted Hong Kong's economy, and
Yeah.
as well as the rest of the world. But the one thing that really marked out Hong Kong was its ability to really fight back and get back on its feet, carry on as usual. So I thought, well, firstly, I would love to go back to the home of my parents and my ancestors and live and work there, because every time I go back to Hong Kong and visit, I've always enjoyed. I've loved going to Hong Kong, exploring the city. And secondly, it didn't necessarily have to be in the legal industry. So at
Yeah.
that point, I was thinking maybe I should start setting up my own business. And so in that summer, I went back to Hong Kong, and my sister was living in Hong Kong, and she was also a lawyer who then switched over in the last few years at that point into legal recruitment. And it turned out that she was phenomenally successful. She had set up the legal desk of a multinational recruitment company in Hong Kong and basically hit the ground running and became one of the top three billers amongst about 60 consultants at the time in that office. Even though she took time out to have family twice, she still remained one of the top three billers consistently over that 5-year period that she was there. And I said to Annie, why don't we join forces and let's do something together? And we
Yeah.
brainstormed like lots of different ideas, and going into recruitment was on the table. But then I felt, the world is our oyster. We can do practically anything we wanted to. And so we brainstormed a lot of different ideas, from, producing our own clothing garment business to, some other sort of maybe a concierge service, or going into real estate. But, the more we talked about it, the more it made sense that with her connections and our legal professional background, that, setting up a legal recruitment business actually made a lot of sense. The plan was for me to take care of the operational side of things, focus a lot on business development and building out my network from basically, I only knew one professional in Hong Kong, and that was one of our family friends. And outside of that, I knew no one. So really,
Wow.
my first few months was really to pound the streets and get to know as many professionals, not just lawyers, but also accountants and bankers as possible. And so I would use that as a learning curve, whilst also at the same time learning the ropes as a recruiter and developing relationships with law firms and companies who had in-house legal teams. And so it just developed from there, bit by bit, and we managed to grow. And one of the things I'm thankful for that again, it was just coming out of the financial crash, and I mean, Hong Kong was in a bit of a, I would say, depression, but at the same time, the economy wasn't great
Mm,
at the time. But I actually felt that
yeah.
it was actually a great time to set up a business and launch, because that's when expectations are low amongst everyone. And so, setting up a business can help you ease into the business community at that point. And that's one of the things that if I had my time again and had to do it again with the volatility that we're facing today, I think even now is actually a good time to be setting up a business, whatever you wish to do.
Could you please now tell us about your three businesses that you work on or have right now? And how do you put yourself out there? Because as you mentioned that you did not know many people at all, and you had to keep meeting people to, inform them about your business and build that brand awareness. So how did you put yourself out there?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean that's a good question. Now, fortunately, I had a good foundation and a very good career, an enjoyable career as a lawyer. And one of the good things in the UK, and practically, if you're a corporate lawyer anywhere in the world, is that you're going to be working with and collaborating with a lot of intermediaries, no matter which discipline you're in. Whether you're in litigation, you'll be working with barristers, you'll be working with forensic accountants and expert witnesses in that particular field. It just so happened that in my industry, I was working with a lot of accountants and corporate finance advisors. And, these corporate advisory teams are basically the engineers of the M&A deals. They're the ones who basically put a deal together. They'll match the buyer and seller. They'll start plugging in numbers and create nice, sophisticated models about how to get to a valuation of a business. And towards the end, that's the end of the deal when things are more or less agreed commercially. That's when you draw in a lawyer. And so with that, we would work very closely with the accountants and the corporate advisors about, how to put the deal together. And so I was working with a lot of the big four and the national and international accounting firms who had that sort of capability. And when I went to Hong Kong, because I had very good relationships with these accountants and they were from multinational accounting firms, I just simply asked them, I said, look, I'm going to Hong Kong. I'd like to get to know your counterparts in Hong Kong. And, would you mind making an introduction for me? Because I'd like to get to know more people. And fortunately, no, they were very generous enough to offer that and made those kind of introductions for me. And that was really the foundation for me to start to get to know people. And a few of them said, look, we've got events that we lay on. We'll invite you to these events. And then, bit by bit, you go to these networking events, you get to know more professionals, not just simply in the accounting industry, but also banking and finance. Bit by bit, you get to know more lawyers, and from there, it builds out and it grows organically as a result of that. Now, these days, probably a large chunk of that networking probably belongs to the social media, but at the time, LinkedIn didn't have that facility. It was just really just an online CV. So,
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of opportunities. Yes, it is very competitive now compared with 15 years ago, but I think you've got more tools available at your disposal to be able to connect with people and build relationships faster.
This is also why I love networking, is just because you don't really know who you're going to end up connecting with. And that opens so many doors and endless opportunities for you to get to the stage that you want to. So I really believe in just networking and just meeting as many people as I can, because you just don't know amongst the peers that you know who will lead to that one opportunity that you most desire or need in the future. So absolutely. Now, talking about being as a lawyer and with the rise of AI and now people using AI in their work, how do you feel of it potentially impacting your profession?
I have to say that in any profession, AI is going to help enhance and supplement any profession. And, I think it's a good thing. Yes, there will be victims, in the sense that, there will be jobs lost as a result. But at the same time, it's going to help with operational efficiencies, with productivity, and ultimately produce results that businesses need in order to not only survive, but also thrive. And we're now entering into a really exciting phase where technology really is filtering through from the big multinational companies through to the small businesses. And that's the really exciting part for me as a small business owner as well, that there are so many tools available at our disposal that, that was once only, even 5 years ago was within grasp of the big multinational companies with deep pockets who could invest in this sort of thing. So yes,
Yeah.
okay, they've got their own tools to play around with, but also, there are now more and more companies with not just AI, but other tools which help with operational efficiency. And like, for example, in the recruitment business, you actually have recruitment software which is designed to help with your workflows. And yeah, even from the time that we started in 2010, that we had what were known as ATSs, or applicant tracking systems. So effectively, a much more sophisticated version of Excel, with a lot more buttons and a lot more functions, to help you store and retrieve information about candidates and clients. And now, things are getting even more smarter. You can utilize AI into a lot of things. For example, your search filters and, sort of reminders of keeping in contact with people, and so on and so forth. So I can only say that it's a good thing. And if anything, going forward in terms of growing my business, perhaps I don't need as many people as I did once before.
Oh, that's very fair. And I'm glad to hear that you do find AI useful and the fact that in terms of current circumstances, it's going to be around us anyways. It's just more of us being able to adapt and how can we use it to the best of our abilities, really. Now, my final question for you is throughout your career, you've gone through a lot with working as a lawyer and eventually starting your own companies right now that you're continuously working on. What has been a big learning lesson you've learned over your career and you still take to this day?
I think a couple of things that have evolved, I think some I took to heart, right from the beginning. I mean, one of the things that perhaps I would have told myself as an 18-year-old was to take more calculated risks. I think, for me, I think steady as she goes was one of the things that I wanted to pursue and follow. I said, look, this is why I'm going to do these A levels. They're safe options. Then I'll do a law degree, and there will be consistency there. That shows my discipline, and then I'll apply for a training contract and then qualify as a lawyer. Obviously there were a lot of hurdles and barriers along the way, but at the same time, in terms of taking calculated risks in my circumstance, I think one of the things that I would have loved to have done was to have moved to Asia much earlier. And one of the things I could have done was actually quit my job at the time as a junior lawyer and come over to Hong Kong. Now, one of the things I tried to do was apply for jobs remotely. And then every time I came over here, I just enjoyed living here and, exploring life. And I always kept on thinking, oh, I would love to live here. And one of the things I should have done was just taken that risk to move here. And another lesson I learned was as I was applying for jobs remotely from the UK to get to Hong Kong, was that the core barrier for me was my limited Chinese language skills. And even then, it was such an important requirement for many jobs as a lawyer because of the impact of the handover of Hong Kong to China in 1997. I guess that coincided with the start of my career as well. And there's businesses from the whole spectrum of industries at the time were realizing that in order to succeed, Hong Kong needed more Mandarin speakers. And so that was one of the essential requirements at the time, as it is now. And one of the calculated risks I should have taken was maybe just to have taken off. And this is one of the things I do advise candidates now, junior lawyers, when I ask them about their speaking and reading and writing abilities in Mandarin. They, a lot of them will say, it's not business level or it's not perfect. And I say to them, look, if you really want to take off in your career, I would advise you to just go to China and go to one of the second or third tier cities and just immerse yourself for about a year studying Mandarin intensively to a point where you get to a high level of understanding and a business level of understanding. So you can actively participate in client meetings in Mandarin. And, who knows, had I taken that option, perhaps we may not even be sitting here talking about my career, or if we were still, I'd be talking about something very different. Who knows?
Yeah.
So that would be one of my key takeaways. Another lesson I would probably say to myself in relation to some of the things I should be doing is invest in yourself. I think no matter what you do, if you experience periods where you don't have a job, rather than just sitting around at home feeling sorry for yourself, do something more active. Either studying, and it doesn't necessarily mean having to fork out a lot of money to go for a master's degree. Just going to the library and reading a lot of self-help books or reading on a particular topic which might help further expand your knowledge in an area or help you develop further skills, to volunteering, actively taking part. And I've seen a lot of people over the years who have, one of the good things about Hong Kong is there are a lot of people who volunteer. That's really a good way to show that you are being proactive and, you are developing life skills along the way. And, and employers see a lot of value in that when they're interviewing people and seeing CVs. At a young age, when you're at university, one of the things that you have as your advantage is time, simply time, and for me, I felt, I was just caught along this wave because you're studying with other fellow law students. Everyone's geared towards applying for training contracts and internships and everything else. And one of the things I found was that all my summer holidays, there were 3 months for the summer. And for
Yeah.
most of those summer holidays, I ended up applying for summer jobs in law firms or training contracts. And I really didn't enjoy my summer holidays in that time. And, one of the things is, yes, of course, apply for internships, and all you need is one really good quality internship with a top-notch law firm, and that should be enough, and then enjoy the rest. Going back to the advice that my sixth form tutor advised our entire class is, you need to have a balance of work and play. And,
Yeah.
during those summer holidays, don't regret having that feeling that, all those summer days, those sunshine days, I could have gone out and explored the UK or wherever you are, or explore the world. Just do it. Spend one of those summer holidays backpacking, as quite a lot of other students would do.
Wow, very wise words, Chris. Yeah, definitely. I think totally immersing yourself in culture and just putting yourself out there, like you mentioned earlier, but doing that and taking more calculated risks is definitely, it might seem very daunting, but it definitely and certainly does pay off in the long run. And I think it's all about just taking it sooner, really. So, yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for being a guest on the podcast. For those who would like to get in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, probably the easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me under Chris Tang in Hong Kong. Although, to be fair, there are quite a lot of Chris Tangs, but usually people do find me on there, or if you find look me up on the Star Anise website, staranise.com.hk, or yuzu.com.hk. Which is the alternative legal services division that we operate as well. Through those social medias, people can reach out to me quite easily. And if they do, mention that they saw me on your podcasts, and then that will, show the outreach and spread of your growing podcast viewership.
Certainly. Thank you, Chris. And yes, for those watching right now, make sure to like and subscribe. A new guest will be on shortly. Stay tuned. And thank you, Chris, for joining us here today.
Thanks, Manav. It's been a real pleasure.